Welkom iedereen bij Let's Play van 999. Blijf leuk om te zeggen. In dit deel gaan we kijken waar we naartoe moeten. There are 4 possible routes. A, B, C en D. A zie je. B, A en B lijken op elkaar. C is daar en deze daar. Maar bovenlijk couldn't be opened. Next was through. This was closed all the way to the main staircase. Zou kunnen. Hoezo niet? Ja. Lijkt deze mogelijk de beste oplossing. All four looked them up. They all looked at the staircase. Its lazy curve leading down deeper into the ship. Yep, Rudy. Oké, duidelijk. They jogged down the stairs until they reached the sea deck. Just be sure to keep going to check the deck beneath. Toward gazed back at them, its smooth surface like a great mirror. As ominous as it was, Jinpei took at least some comfort from the fact that the level hadn't gone up much since the last time he had seen it. They turned back to the sea deck. It didn't take them long to find the 2 elevators in front of the stairs. They looked identical to the elevators on the top floor, with one exception. These elevators had a card reader on the wall behind them. On the card reader was a strange mark. It looks... is het dan niet... Voor mij... Dit is dan Jupiter als ik het goed heb onthouden. Lotus had taken hold of Junpei's hair. She began to shake him violently and in thought he had heard a loud growl coming from her throat. Such violence, Junpei began to wonder if she wasn't the devil himself. When uncomfortable, June spoke up. Oh, Mercury. It's 2 wings on Hermes' staff. Hermes, Herpes, whatever. They gave up on the elephant and returned to the stairs. A hallway stretched out to the left. En meer deuren. A great many doors lined both sides of the hallway. They weren't sure how many, but certainly enough to be discouraging. Ja. Frustration and fear building, they walked back to the stairs. The doorway was a small hallway, quickly headed into it. It was approximately the same size as the alcove in the front of the stairs. The door led toward the stand and in its end was a set of double doors. Jimpy nodded and grabbed the one closest to him. He gave the small talk and felt it move. It was unlocked. Thrilled to have found an opening door, he threw it open. En meer deuren, jongens. Jimpy didn't know what to make of what he saw. 3, 7 en 8. He simply stood unable to speak. The other simply stared open-mouthed. After a few moments, Santa managed to speak. A massive room stretched out in front of him. More cavern than a room. Its vastness was oppressive and it bore down on the 4 companions. It was not empty, however. The entire room was filled with lines upon lines of beds. They were simple things, little more than pipe and thin mattresses. He hadn't been able to put a name to the harsh scent that pervaded the room. The room swam with a harsh biting smell of antiseptic. In the center of the room were shelves stacked with medicine and a number of medical devices, the functions of which Jinpei did not know. More importantly, however, on the back wall of the room were 4 doors. 3 of them were emblazoned with large, single-digit thick red paint. The door on the left was labeled 3. The second door from the left had no number, but the third had been given a 7. And the rightmost door had an 8. There could be no doubt they were numbered doors. It did strike Jimpei strange, however, that the door between the 3 and 7 should be blank. What he wanted, could it mean? Jimpei headed towards the doors, weaving his way behind the beds. He started with the door on 3 on the left and moved to the right until he reached door 8. dat is waar. Geen reactie. It didn't respond. All four took Deel's placing their hands off over the rat, but it refused to respond. They pulled at the lever and still it did nothing. Soon discovered it wasn't only the rat for door 8 that was behaving strangely. Door 7 also refused to respond. And door 3 was similarly silent. None of them would respond. What did it mean? Je weet. It was at the moment that they heard a voice from behind them. Hey! But it was more than just Snake. Ace, Clover and 7 quickly filled into the room as well. Although they were glad to see one another, it wasn't terribly surprising that they had. Although they were glad, if it hadn't been the other party would open the gate in front of the kitchen, it wasn't unreasonable. The rest of Snake's team, however, did look rather surprised. Huh? After a moment of silent surprise, everyone suddenly began to talk, desperate to exchange information. They talked about the rooms they had been through and how they had ended up in the same place. Of course, none of it was very useful information, but that hardly mattered. They hoped to seem to see one another again. Although the level of cheer varied greatly from person to person, each one of them was wearing some manner of smile, almost as though they had already forgotten about the death of the knife man. Now for Jim, perhaps it wasn't it. Perhaps thoughts of his death were what drove him to smile at one another. Not in a moment or hateful way, no. The knife man had died, but he was still alive, and there was something to be happy about. A sort of simply uncompleted joy. Junpei thought the joy of being alive. Still alive. He still felt sorry for the knife man, but more than anything, Junpei was just happy to be alive. There you have it, our half of the story. His part finished. Ace fell silent. For a moment Junpei was silent and thought, then he spoke. Junpei examined the 3 rats again just in case. On the bottom of each was a long thin gap. It looked like a slot for something, probably something electronic. Okay. For a moment everyone was something deep in thought. Of all people, it was several answered with confidence. The gigantic. Jim looked, so did everyone else. 7 knit his brows for a moment and began to explain. The gigantic. It explained that she had been a sister ship to the Titanic, built in the early 20th century. The Titanic had 2 sister ships who were identical to one another in nearly every aspect. The gigantic was said to be one of them. She was initially intended to be a passenger liner, like the Titanic, but soon after the ship was launched the First World War began, and she was pressed into duty by the British Navy as a hospital ship. Sometime later the gigantic was damaged by a German mine in the Aegean Sea. She managed to run aground after the incident and consequently she was not sunk. What then happened to the after her failure and sorry, mijn hele keel begint nog een beetje naar de kloot te raken. One theory ran that a man named Lord Gordon Purchaser. Lord Gordon seemed had been one of the few survivors of the Titanic tragedy, and the trauma had turned him into an obsessive collector of all things related to the Titanic. As his obsession deepened, he began to decide that the Titanic itself. That of course was impossible. The Titanic lay at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. The gigantic, however, had not suffered such a dire fate, and as she was identical to her sister ship, she thought Lord Gordon's eye. Gordon. Oké. Seven looked desperate, doing anything to avoid meeting Lona's piercing stare. He scratched his head for a moment and gave up. Finally he opened his mouth. Lona shook her head. Junpei was, he felt legitimately struck by what seemed to be new and very important information. Everyone else, however, seemed unimpressed. In fact, they all looked at Junpei as though he had said something very strange. For his next question, everyone nodded. They almost have to save Junpei from further embarrassment. A bell began to ring from far away. Wow, that was fair. Junpei counted each time carefully. 11, 12. Het is nog 12 uur en we hebben nog steeds 6 uur. Wauw. Ja. The earlier experience had apparently not encouraged Lotus to trust Seven. Seven scratched his head awkwardly. After a little more research, they split up and headed towards the room to begin searching them. Junpei was just to search the room on the starboard side, moving from fore to aft. Just determine when they would return to report the findings. The next time the clock sounded the time. When they did, they would meet back in the large room full of beds. If they had searched any of them, Miss Capone's, they were to yell for the others. If this strategy failed, they would return to discuss the options later. The dice decided they left to begin searching. Out in the hallway, they went each to the rooms they had been inside. However, niks werd gevonden. Ja, niks werd gevonden. Zo zeg maar, er is een kaart, er was een deur met een kaart. Wij hebben een... Nou, wacht, wij hebben geen kaart, laat maar. Before Junpei heard the bell ringing. It's only once, it was 1 AM. Ik vind het nog steeds zo fucking mooi om naar te kijken. He jogged through the entrance of the lodge to find 6 of the others already there. Ace, Santa, Clover, June, Seven and Lotus. Waar is Snake? He'll get in front of door number 8. Get in front of the red next to door number 8. Had one of them found the missing piece? It was June who answered him. She was pointing at the red. He pushed for the others until he stood in front of it. Vacant. Immediately knew what she had meant. Display on the front of the red, vacant. Junpei sighed. Junpei wondered what she was dictating. The others looked as confused as June, but kept their mouths shut. Joe knew something he didn't, and Junpei wasn't about to leave things that way. Finally, Lotus frowned and spoke. Niemand heeft iets gevonden. Wow. Junpei looked at the bottom of the red again just to make sure. The side had been open and the bottom was now covered with metal. Clearly, whatever had been missing had been returned. Zero zuigt. Junpei quickly examined the other 2 boxes. Yeah. Sapphire that were also repaired, but still very confused. He returned to the others. Ace and June nodded silently. Seven raised up to say, "Not me," and Santa just shrugged. Only Clover lowered her head and did nothing. Those I noticed, where's Snake? Junpei swept his eyes across the room, but Snake was nowhere to be seen. Zullen we Snake vinden? Geen idee, we zien het in het volgende deel. Ik hoop het groot te hebben en ik zie jullie de volgende keer weer. Doei!